anti-gravity not even tied to Claude Code. So the first thing we need to do is obviously we need to set up Visual Studio Code. In order to do that, just head over to Visual Studio Code on Google over here and then download for whatever your specific application is. In my case, I'm downloading the Mac OS. I'm then going to have the download appear in the top right-hand corner. I'm then going to give that a click and then go download unverified file. And then over here on a Mac, you again have to drag the little window over. So I'm just going to do that. And once you're done, you're going to have a page that looks something like this. So remember earlier how I said it was like a file editor? Well, that's what this little left-hand side is about. If I click open a folder, I can actually go through and I can open a folder on my computer. So why don't I just go and open, left click contact. Okay, so now I'm inside of the left-click contact folder, and you can see we have some files here, a gitignore, claude.nd, contact, index, and a netlify.toml. We're going to go through all that sort of stuff in a moment. It's not super important for now. But this is sort of like where the file explorer functionality comes in. If I were to click on one of these, as you can see, we've now opened up a big text editor right in the middle of the screen. And so this is a bunch of CSS. It's a programming language. What's really cool is with Claude Code, you don't actually have to know how to read any of this stuff. It'll just tell you everything. And so that is the text editor functionality. I can make changes. Hey, what's up? You know, I could create a new file here if I wanted to called message.md. And I could say, hey, how's it going, YouTube? So just like in that way, we basically have file editing functionality, and then we can also select files to work on and stuff like that. And then on the right-hand side, you have an agent tab, which is where you have your chat interface with AI. Now, right out of the gate, the VS Code chat interface isn't actually Claude Code. In order to access Claude Code, you have to download it as an extension. So I'm going to run you guys through that right now. On the left-hand side here, click on these little blocks, then just type Claude Code. You'll see a variety of these. The one that you're looking for is the one that's developed by Anthropic, the one with that little check mark in it. Be very wary of downloading extensions that are not from official developers and vendors like Anthropic, simply because people have been known to insert malware and different things like that in these. So it's very important that you preferentially use verified sources. In my case, I've already installed this, but all you have to do is go through that little installation wizard here. And then once you're done, you will have access to Claude Code. The question is, okay, I have access to Claude Code. How do I actually use it? Well, it's really easy. If you just go to the top right-hand corner of this little agent window, you now can just click on Claude Code. But you'll also see that there's a Claude logo up here as well. Well, what the hell does this mean? If you click on this, you'll open up just like another window. And in my case, I open it up with the terminal default. So it's going to open up this in the terminal. This could be pretty intimidating and kind of annoying, to be honest, juggling all these things. I'm just going to zoom in so it's easier for us to see. So my recommendation is, at least for beginners, just stick to the one on the right. That one's simpler. And as you can see, it's a different user interface than the terminal. Okay, so how exactly do you use this, and what are all of the different features and buttons and stuff like that? Covering the interface, obviously up top, you have the past conversations tab. And so as you build up more conversation history, you'll actually be able to jump back to any prior conversation you've had with Claude Code over here. You can do that both locally and then on the web. I don't have access to either of these yet because I just set this up fresh for you guys. Underneath that, you have the Claude Code logo. Underneath that, you have that cute little jellyfish or lobster, whatever the heck it is. Underneath, you have your little chat window. So here's where I can actually talk to Claude. Hey, Claude, what's up? Once we open this, you'll see that similarly to how we had before, we have that little accomplishing, fidgeting, whatever. We have that little like process text come up. After that, you then have the response. The response comes in this little window, although you'll see it's different when it accesses files and stuff like that. Underneath at the very bottom left-hand corner, you have the various permission modes. Remember how earlier mine said dangerously skip permissions? Well, you can do the same thing here. If you just click on this, you can cycle through all of the different possible modes, and you'll see that little window around the chatbot also changes. So in my case, I'm asking before edits, which means because this is running locally on my computer, before it makes any changes to any local files, I'm going to say, hey, just ask me to make sure. Now, this is pretty safe, and a lot of people, especially coders and developers that are a little more old school, will usually work like this. But personally, given that when Claude's really in the thick of things, it's asking me for edits every 5 freaking seconds. If you really want to unlock that productivity, as I talked about before, you either use edit automatically or use bypass permissions. And I'll cover plan mode and whatnot later as well. To the right of that is, and this is kind of intimidating for some people to understand, but this is the file that is currently being fed in as context. So for instance, do you see how here it says index.html? And if I click this, I get this little eye icon. Well, if I leave this open, basically Claude is currently looking at this file. So what file are you looking at right now? it'll now tell me that it's looking through the index.html that's open in my editor. It hasn't read through the contents yet because reading through the contents of this massive file would feed a fair amount of tokens into context, which would charge me a fair amount of money. So right now it's not doing any of that. But suffice to say, I can actually edit this in real time. Yes, change the title to Nick's YouTube example. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through my file. It's going to find the title, which is listed right over here, and then it's going to change that for me. This is an example of a really simple, easy, and straightforward change, but I could do way more. I could refactor this whole thing from dark mode to light mode. So I'm actually going to ask it to do so. Refactor this index.html from dark mode to light mode. And if you don't know what this means, it's okay, bear with me. We're actually going to rebuild a whole app using Claude Code and various design patterns in a moment. The first thing it'll do is it'll try planning out the changes that it's going to make. And so it's doing a bunch of programmatic adjacent things right now, like it's filtering out a bunch of different CSS snippets. It's doing a fair amount of work here. And you don't need to be a programmer to understand what's going on. We basically now given this a task, it's deconstructing the task into a list of high-level steps. Then it's going to go through and it's actually going to present this plan to me for me to say yes or no to. Now you'll notice that when I did this, in addition to the interface changing and now the colors being blue, in the bottom right-hand corner, we now have sort of a little pause button. This pause button is pretty important because it allows us to actually stop a Claude Code execution in process, so like while it's working. So I could theoretically change this at any point in time, okay, and I could actually pause it, and then maybe I could give it some more instructions or, I don't know, tell it to do something differently. So I'm actually going to click this little button, then I'm going to go to bypass permissions. I'll say no plan, just do it. And what I've done is I've interrupted the process and the tool call, and now it's going to go through, and instead of having to do this big fat plan, I'm just going to say, it's the wild, wild west, buddy. Just get in there and start making some changes. When I did this, you'll notice that there's now a thinking tab that's open. If you click on this, you can actually peer into the internal thoughts of Claude as it goes through and accomplishes your request. So in this case, it said the user wants me to just refactor the dark mode to light mode without planning. Let me read the whole file, understand all the colors, and then make the changes. And as you see, we just had some changes made, which is what this little blue thing is here, showing that we've made, the changes. So immediately after thinking, it then did some more thinking. Then down at the very bottom, it's now updated a bunch of the sections of my code, and it's continuing down some little to-do list. So this is how you interact with Claude Code through the graphical user interface. And there are a couple of additional things, like you can click on this button to attach files and folders and use the browser. You can also check all of the commands here, which are pretty powerful stuff, and I'll cover them all in due time. So that's Claude Code in Visual Studio Code, VS Code. Let's now cover how it looks in Anti-Gravity, how to set that up, and then immediately after, we're going to build an actual real web app using Claude Code. As expected, Anti-Gravity is pretty similar. They have a website here called antigravity.google. It's very sexy and clean. Wouldn't be surprised they built this with agents. You just click download for whatever your specific, operating system is. In my case, Mac OS with Apple Silicon. I'm going to give that a click. Then it'll go through that same process that we just did for VS Code. Once you open up Anti-Gravity, it looks very similar to what we just saw a moment ago with VS Code. And that's because the two are sort of built on each other. So just like VS Code was both a file explorer, a file editor, kind of a notepad, and an agent manager, you can see here we have those three same ideas. On the left-hand side, we're going to have the folders. On the middle, we're going to be able to edit the text of the files that we work with. And then on the right-hand side, we can actually talk to agents. First thing I'm going to do is I'll click Open Folder, and we'll go back to left-click Contact, just so you guys could see what we're dealing with. And you'll understand here that the UX is just slightly different than what we had earlier. Some things are indented. We have like some little cool symbols on the left-hand side of the file. This isn't super important, but I just think Anti-Gravity looks cleaner, which is why I like using it. In the middle here, if I click this index.html, you'll see that we also have the text pop up, just like we did earlier. And the only real difference between Anti-Gravity and VS Code is just what we have on this right-hand side. Earlier, we could have used Claude Code really easily because there was an actual dedicated Claude Code button. Right now, there isn't. In order to access Claude Code, assuming that you've installed it, so head over here, Claude Code for VS Code, give that installation button a click. Assuming that we've installed it, what we have to do instead is we have to double-click somewhere here and then click on this little Claude icon. Okay. And then just delete the agent icon. And now you have the same layout that we had earlier in VS Code. It's just now you have it with Claude Code. The reason why is just because Anti-Gravity is a Google product. So they try and push the Google Gemini series of models. That's what we had on the right-hand side earlier. And to be clear, this is a Claude Code specific course, but you can also use whatever model you want to do whatever purpose. Like the model type is less important than just the fact that you're really good at using it and the fact that it's smart. So exact same layout here, not going to cover it anymore. Let's get into actually building some stuff. So let's now build our very first app/web page with Claude Code. For simplicity's sake, I'm starting with probably the most straightforward build, which is just going to be a web page. And we're not just going to do the hero header, which is the top or above the fold section. We're going to do the whole website. And the reason why I'm starting with this is because I just want everybody to understand how good Claude Code and similar tools have gotten at being able to design high-quality websites. This is a site up here called godly.website, and what it does is it basically just showcases really high-quality design. And every single one of these, with maybe just a couple of exceptions, is now doable in probably, I want to say, less than 10 minutes or so, front to back, using Claude Code. And this isn't me just, pretending. This is something that I have done myself dozens of times. I've built really high quality websites. The other day I built like 15 or so for a project. And they all look just like this. So award-winning design, award-winning app functionality and stuff like that. These are just a few of the things that you guys are going to learn today. In addition, you're also going to learn how Claude.md, which is the system brain file, affects your prompts. I'm going to run you guys through the 3 major ways that people currently design sites and the various ways that you guys could use these approaches to both design websites, apps, and more or less anything else you want. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about deploying. So let's start with Claude.md. I have open in anti-gravity here the same workspace that we were looking at before with just a couple of changes. Namely, there's this node_modules folder here, which you guys don't have to pay attention to. This is automatically generated by Claude Code every time we use a library or use some sort of NPM package. And then underneath, we have Claude.md. Now, Claude.md, as mentioned, is the brain of your workspace. To make it really, really simple and straightforward for you, because I think a lot of people misunderstand how Claude.md's work, let's just look at a hypothetical conversation. Over here, let's say you are on the right-hand side. And so what you do, is you say, hey, research X for me. Research, I don't know, the best trending posts on Twitter in my niche, whatever the heck, right? And then what ends up happening is the model afterwards, Claude, whatever you're using, whether it's Opus 4.6 or 4.5 or Sonnet or Haiku, it'll respond to you in purple saying, sure, one moment. After it returns whatever you want, then, you continue in this vein. And so what I'm trying to get at is there's a pattern here, right? There's user, and then there's model, and then there's user, and then there's model. The way that the Claude.md prompt works is basically at the very first message, before you even get to that point, what's hidden from you is the fact that there's actually another prompt. This prompt is injected at the very top of your conversation string before you even send the first message. And so this Claude.md, being sort of the very first thing that the model reads and sort of internalizes, is really, really important to help steer the output of the ship. Now, what is steering the output of the ship? Well, I often use an analogy here. Let's say you're somewhere on the east coast of, North America, and you're trying to go to, I don't know, let's say the westmost coast of Africa or something like that. As you guys know, these intervening distances are really huge. These are, I don't actually know how long it is, but probably at least 10,000 kilometers or so. Now, if you're a ship positioned right over here, and this is your port, and your goal port is over here, let's hypothetically say you have limited ability to steer the ship. For whatever reason, the steering wheel or whatever the ship equivalent is, it just doesn't really turn that much. What that means is if you wanted to make it as close as humanly possible to that X, what you would have to do, logically, is you'd have to make sure that you're very, very accurate, at least when you leave the port. And the reason why is because if you're not, if you give even a very slight range of possible, I want to say angles that you could go, it may not seem like that big of a difference if you go, from this line to this line, at least initially, right? But over an intervening distance of tens of thousands of kilometers, obviously this goes, a very, very long way away from what your goal is. And so steerability in AI is basically when you try and minimize the number of potential or the width of all of the potential options. And so what Claude.md does is it allows you to take the space of a really wide angle of ways that the AI could go, and